Welcome to Tax 1099.
Material today. So my name is Ed Pratt, and welcome to our session sponsored by Tax 1099, powered by Zenwork. Tax 1099 is one of our products here at Zenwork, and we build a variety of tools that help in the tax and compliance space. This is me, Ed Pratt. I am a co-founder and chief operating officer here at Zenwork, and I have been here for about 10 years. Got a number of years of experience with ADP and PwC in a couple of different capacities previous to my experience here at Zenwork. Currently live in Maryland, but I've lived in a few places here as I've gone around, and I do go around the country some and get a chance to meet some folks. I was at the Digital CPA conference last week and QuickBooks Connect a few weeks before Thanksgiving. So I've had the fortune to come around and meet some of our users out there in person, face to face as well. So that's been nice this year. Karen Henry is our Director of Learning and Development. She is here as well, and we will also have another member of our team with us to answer questions through the Q&A panel. So a couple of housekeeping items as we get started. There is a handout that consists of the slides that we'll be presenting today in the resources section in the Zoom toolbar. If you don't see it, it's possible that it is under the three dots and more. So when you click on that, you'll see the little box that says resources there. And then for questions, because we can't share the microphone with everybody out there, it's a pretty large group. We will be asking you guys to type in your questions in the Q&A panel. Bonnie or Leslie is here, and one of them will be able to answer those questions for you. Or if there are questions that can't be answered by them, we will have a little bit of time at the end of the session, if all goes according to plan, to answer some of the questions right at the end of our session. We'll also be sending a recording of this to you after the session. It will come to your email that you registered with, so be on the lookout for that. A quick disclaimer for us, we are not providing tax, legal, or accounting advice as part of this session. This is for information purposes only, and we will be asking you to look for your own tax, legal, or accounting advisors before you engage in any specific transactions that may be out there. All right, so if you are here and you are looking for CPE credit as a bookkeeper or an accountant, someone who is needing to get those final CPE credits in as part of your annual quota, then you're in luck. This session does qualify for 1 hour of CPE credit, and in order to receive that 1 hour of CPE credit, you need to stay the standard 50+ minutes and respond to 3 out of the 4 poll questions that we will be having as we go through the session today. We will get that CPE certificate out to you in the next 4 to 5 business days. We're a little backed up on that right now, taking a little while for those to go out because we've had quite a few people who have been attending the sessions, but we will get those out to you just as soon as we can. As for what we're going to cover today in this session, we're going to go through some IRS tax form changes. There's a few things that are pertinent to our audience. There's at least one thing that we'll cover that may be pertinent to some and not pertinent to others, but we will be talking about a couple of changes that have taken place. And because the IRS is the IRS, they change things up to the last minute. And so one of the things that I had been covering in this webinar going back to November, we're not really covering anymore because they changed it. So you'll see that as we get into the slides. We are also going to talk about some changes inside of Tax 1099 itself. So we've made some enhancements to our user interface. We've also made some updates to how forms are delivered electronically to recipients. So not the e-file part that goes to the IRS or to the states, but the piece that goes to the recipients. We'll talk about what that looks like. Then we'll go into some changes that impact our enterprise users. Those include editing access for data entry users, giving them some additional capabilities that they didn't have before, and assigning payers by what we call a group ID. So we'll explain what all that means as we go through. We'll talk about how you can unmask the PDF if that is something that you would like to do. There's options on that for either our enterprise users or our essential users, and then enabling and disabling the API access as well. We'll talk about scheduling IRS filings. That's something that we've had for a while, but sometimes people aren't aware of it. And then we will look at how we've modified corrected forms. So if you created the form originally on Tax 1099, there's an easier way to do a type 1 correction now, and we'll talk about how to do that. opting out of email updates, and gathering receipts are the last two things that we will talk about in today's session. And as I said, if you have questions as we go through on anything, whether we're covering it or not, please do put those questions in your Q&A panel, and we will try to get those answered as quickly as we can. With that, I'm going to bring up our first poll question, and this is just kind of a gauge of the audience out there. Want to look at how many forms you file, and if you are a bookkeeper or an accountant, this would be for your firm. If you are a business owner or someone who works for a business owner and does the filing for that business, then this would be for that company that you are working with. And you may have a couple that you work with, but just kind of overall, how many are you filing in your ordinary course of business if you are doing the filing yourself or for your firm? All right, so we're at about 80% participation so far. So I'm going to give you just a couple more seconds to respond to that. Again, this is one of the 4 polls that will come up. So you're going to have 3 more shots at doing the polls. You do need to respond to 3 of the 4 if you are hoping to receive CPE credit. And I see a couple of people have just joined the session, so hopefully they will be able to participate as well. So again, like 5 more seconds to put your answer in there. All right, I'm going to end this first poll. You will have 3 more chances to do polls. I'm going to share the results out with you, and so this is pretty typical of the audience that we've been seeing. We've got about 90% are in that 500 or less category, and a good chunk of those are falling in the 21 to 150. And just so you can kind of know from our typical client base, we have a number of probably a huge number of people who file under 10 forms, actually, a very small number of forms. And then we have a number of users as well who are filing upwards of 200, 300,000 forms. We have some that are filing up to 1 million forms. So we have people who are kind of all ranges in the size of how many forms they file within Tax 1099. Thanks for answering that question. That kind of gives us a gauge of who's out there in the audience for today's session. All right, so let's talk about some IRS tax changes. As I mentioned, the IRS is implementing changes all the time. They've even implemented one in November that has impacted my presentation. I was doing the presentation when it came out. So we're going to talk about just a couple of things that are going to be in place for this year. And this one is really kind of the most important one, or the most impactful one that we are aware of for our clients. Our clients are typically, small businesses. They're accountants who work with small businesses, or they are, enterprise operations, accounts payable organizations within large companies. For that third group, those large organizations, they haven't had to worry about this for a long time. For our clients who are accountants, they've been filing, electronically for their clients with us for years. For our smaller clients, though, this is where that's going to come into play. The IRS previously was allowing clients, payers, if you will, to file paper forms if they had up to 250 forms that they wanted to file. So previously, if you had 200 1099 miscellaneous forms and you wanted to file them on paper, you could go down to Staples. You could buy the box of multiple boxes at that point of the forms, and you could file those to the IRS yourself with a 1096 on top. Not the case anymore, because the IRS has lowered the threshold for e-filing to 10 forms. So very important that you, as potentially a business owner, or you as an accountant or bookkeeper who is helping your clients, know that is the case. And even more complicated, or even more important probably, is that the IRS is looking at these from a combination of form types now, instead of individual different form types. So in my example here, Ed's Carpet Cleaning Company has 12 1099 NEC forms, 1 1099 miscellaneous, and 1 1099 dividend form. Well, the 12, based on the 10 or plus threshold, the 12 automatically qualify for e-filing. But it's important to know that the miscellaneous and the dividend form that are out there as well, that need to be filed for Ed's Carpet Cleaning, are also needing to be electronically filed. Those can't be sent on paper filing separately themselves. So I have 10 or more across my entity, across my payer. The IRS is going to be looking for me to send all of those electronically rather than any of them via paper. We don't really know yet what the IRS is going to do. If you, send in your 12 1099 NEC forms like this carpet cleaning company did, it might, then you send them in via paper. I don't know if the IRS is going to send them back to you, if they're going to, just send you a penalty notice later. I don't really know how the IRS is going to handle that. We'll find out. But if you want to avoid that, and you should, then electronic filing is the way that you want to approach doing your filings for this season. This is the part of my presentation where I was talking through the change in this 1099K threshold and kind of got the word that they were delaying this. So we're not going to spend time on this. We will come back to this next year, assuming the IRS holds to the date. This was scheduled to go into place last year. Then they rescheduled it for this year. Now they've rescheduled it for next year. So we'll see if they just keep kicking the can down the road or if they intend to actually implement that change. It's a law, so they do have to implement it at some point in time unless Congress does something to modify that. We're going to move on, though, and we're going to talk about this additional form that's coming down the line. This is something we just want to make people more aware of. This is the 1099 DA form, DA for digital assets. It's going to be a brand new IRS tax form, an information return, just like the other 1099s are. And it will be used for the IRS to collect information about buying and selling of digital assets. And digital assets is just a broader term for crypto coins or non-fungible tokens, NFTs that you might have heard about. They are pushing this out now to 2025. This is another one that they had planned to start this year, and then they kind of said, "Oh, well, there's some things we haven't considered, so we need to push it back out a little bit further." One thing that they have said, though, is that they are going to start cost basis tracking as of January 1st of 2023. So going back to January 1st of 2023. What that means is, just like a 1099B form for stocks or bonds, broker and barter form, if you buy something, a digital coin in this case, for $5 and you sell it for $10, then the IRS wants to know what that $5 cost basis was and what the $5 difference is between what you bought and sold it, because that's your income. The difference between those two things are your income. Or going the other way, which most digital assets have, you bought it for $5 and you sold it for $2. So you have a loss of $3 there. They want to know about that, and that is something that is going to be enforced as they go forward, looking at the digital exchanges and so forth that are working with that. So especially for accountants, bookkeepers, enrolled agents, people who are doing maybe some tax filing on behalf of their clients, this is going to be something that's going to come into play on 1040s as you move forward. Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, but if it was income or if it was a loss, they should have been reporting it already. You're right, they should have been reporting it already. But what we found is that the digital exchanges themselves have not been very consistent in reporting those transactions to their user base. And that's because they don't have a very good level of experience in working with tax regulation and compliance. They're pretty good at things like maybe anti-money laundering. So if you've ever signed up for an account on one of these services, like a Coinbase, or in other places as well, actually, that do this as well. But they'll ask you to put a photo ID in, and then they'll ask you to take a picture of your face and look to the right and left and so on, and they'll algorithmically match that up. That's taking care of you are who you say you are. They have to know their customer in order to be able to provide these services. But on the other side, on the other end of compliance in the tax scheme, they have not been doing a very good job of doing that. Some exchanges have been using that 1099B that I mentioned before, that is used by your Charles Schwabs and places like that, where people have accounts and buy and sell stock. Some of them have put it on miscellaneous forms or NEC forms. I've even seen 1099K forms. That's not great, because nobody's really doing the same thing. You may have heard digital referred to as kind of the Wild West, and the IRS doesn't like Wild West situations. So they have started looking at ways that they can get some more enforcement on these digital asset purchases. One of the reasons for that is that the tax gap has continued to grow. And the tax gap is just the difference between what the IRS actually collects and what the IRS thinks they should collect. So, if you're an employee or you're working, you've got a W-2, you're having taxes taken out on a regular basis, you're reporting that income because it's on your W-2. That the Social Security Administration gets it, and then the IRS gets it, and they're going to look at that stuff. On information returns, though, there's no withholdings for the most part. And so, if you have income that's coming in on a 1099 miscellaneous or NEC, or in the case of the crypto exchanges, you're not getting notified about that income, you may say, I don't really need to report that. That's where that tax gap comes in, because somebody might not have reported that information to the IRS. The IRS is also focusing more of their enforcement on wealthy people. And I have a couple of resources at the back of the presentation that relate to the tax gap and the IRS enforcement focus. So, you may have heard that in the last year or so, the IRS has gotten some additional funding. There are talks in Congress about removing some of that or giving more. Who knows what will ever happen with Congress working the way that they are right now. But the IRS's mandate is kind of what it's always been. It's been to see what taxes are owed, see what taxes are paid, and where there are discrepancies to come and check on that. But they are going to focus more on the higher income folks rather than those of us who are normal people and working on our W-2 jobs on a day-to-day basis. All right, so let's look at some of the changes that have taken place inside of Tax 1099 as part of our feedback process. So normally throughout the course of January, when most of our clients are coming on board and filing in Tax 1099, we provide a couple of different ways to give us some feedback. There's an NPS survey that comes up when you do a transaction. We also do some meetings with some of our larger clients, and then we kind of do a lottery and reach out and meet with some of our smaller clients as well. And we just try to collect feedback on, what is it that you guys are looking to have changes made to in Tax 1099 as we move into the next filing season. And two of the biggest changes that we've implemented this year based on that feedback are the new user interface that we'll talk about and our electronic delivery portal. So our updated user interface, and I'm using the term user interface. If you don't know what that means, it's just when you log into a website, what do you see? How does it let you work within that website? So on the left here, you see our Tax 1099 user interface. That's our classic user interface. It's what we've had for the last probably 7 or 8 years that we've had that same look and feel to the site. We're now moving into this modern interface that you see on the right side, but we're moving slowly. So we're giving people an option to use the new user interface this year. If you don't want to use it, perfectly fine. You can continue to use the previous user interface. You can switch back and forth. There's a little toggle switch at the top that says, classic view on the left and modern view on the right. You can log in now. You can play around with it. You can go to the new user interface. You can go back to the classic user interface and just see what the differences are. The new user interface is geared towards, making it look a little better. First of all, just modernizing some of the icons and the text, the font, the things like that. The menu that's on the left, it collapses on itself a little bit, gives you a little bit more room to work in the middle of the page. Also gives you some more easy to follow instructions so that we're walking you through steps of doing things in Tax 1099 rather than, you just landing on the page, which is what previously happened, and saying, well, now what? Well, we've got a really clear button at the top left now that says create a form. And so you can just click there and you can start going through the form filing process. Again, and you'll see a bigger view of it down here at the bottom right. Classic view is still available. So, we did that for a couple of reasons. One is that people don't like change. And so we wanted to make sure that people still had access to how they've been using Tax 1099 in the past. Another is that some of our larger clients create their own training documentation internally. And so we know that they don't want to update that every year. And so we're giving that, time frame, at least through this tax season, possibly even through next tax season, to use either or of the user interfaces so that you've got the ability to pick and choose the one that you really want to work in. All right, so we're going to look next at our electronic delivery portal. And so just kind of taking a step back to how it worked before, most of our clients who wanted to send an electronic form to a recipient were using our email delivery service, and that would allow you to attach a password-protected PDF onto an email that would go out to the recipient. Our assumption when we built it that way was that our clients were collecting the consent from the recipients in order to be able to send that form via electronic means. That's an important thing, because in order to be in compliance with the IRS rules of electronic delivery, the person who's getting the form has to say, yes, I want to receive that form electronically. That is one of the things that we discovered in our feedback sessions this year, was that most of our clients weren't doing any sort of consent collection. So because the IRS requires you to collect consent, we enhanced our electronic delivery portal. So we've had a portal for the last few years, I'd say 5 or 6 years, that that people have been able to use. It was in the manage forms page, and it just said PDF to portal, and it would send the form via the portal to the recipient. It would give them the opt-in option. All that was the same. The big difference was that you couldn't use that until you had actually submitted the forms in Tax 1099. So if you think about the process in Tax 1099, those of you who are users already, you create the forms, and then you get onto the what I call the checkout page, where you're picking the USPS and TIN matching, state filing, and then you click and you pay for the forms. After you pay for the forms, you get a 9-digit reference number, and a receipt comes to your email. At that point was when you could go out and you could go to the manage forms page, and you could send them to the recipient through the portal. Well, collecting the consent then is not as useful, because that is where, it's January the 25th, and maybe they don't really have a whole lot of time to come back in and say, yes, I want to take this electronically. Secondly, if they didn't want to take it electronically, you had to come back in and request the mail yourself. So we enhanced this so that you can go in now and you can request consent for any of your recipients. So you just have the recipient record in there. You can import those in if that's something you want to do. It's December now, so most of your payments have likely been made through the year. I know there's still 3.5 weeks or whatever in December, and so there will be payments that you'll make through there. But you can get most of your people notified now. They can start opting in to receive their form electronically. This is what it looks like from their side as a recipient. They're going to get an email that's going to come to them. This email has actually been updated just a little bit. I was working with a client a few days ago, and they pointed out a couple of things that would be helpful. And so we've updated it a little bit, but it will name you as the client, or if you are an accountant or bookkeeper working with your clients, it will put your client's name in there. They simply click on the buttons here, and they go out and they're able to opt in or opt out of receiving that electronic delivery. If they opt out, then you automatically know that they are going to be getting a paper copy of that form. If they opt in, you automatically know they want to get an electronic copy of that form. The people who don't do anything, we've got some automation built inside of Tax 1099. It's in your account page in Tax 1099, and you can set that up so that if they have not opted in by a certain date, then we'll go ahead and send them the paper copy as well. So it gives you coverage either way. You're compliant either way, whether that person chooses to take the electronic delivery. You've got the opt-in date timestamped there. And if they don't choose to opt in, then you're sending them the paper mail copy in a timely fashion. So it's a good change, a good enhancement for sending those forms electronically to your recipients and being in compliance with the IRS regulations around that. All right, so let's look at our second poll question here. This is directly related to what we were just talking about. This is the IRS allows payers to send forms electronically or by USPS without consulting the recipient. It's just a true or false question. So pop your answer in there, and we will take a look at the results here in just a moment. All right, so I've got about 90% who have answered the question so far. Take about 3 more seconds. This is the second Of the 4 polls that we'll present, as I said earlier, if you want CPE credit, you need to respond to 3 of the 4 polls. I'm going to close the poll now and share the results out with you guys. And most of you did get that correct. It is false. You do need to consult with the recipient, or your client needs to consult with the recipient. Somebody needs to collect the affirmative consent from the recipient in order for that form to be sent electronically to them. Otherwise, you do need to send it via USPS. All right, so let's talk through some other features of Tax 1099 that have been updated. These are features that are available regardless of using the modern or the classic user interface. And these are available based on your subscription type. So let's talk about subscription type for just a minute. Essential is what the vast majority of our users are on, and we call it a subscription, even though you don't pay anything for it. It's just how you create your account in Tax 1099. You're automatically an essential user. And we call it essential because it gives you everything you need in order to do your filing. So you can create your payers, you can create your recipients, you can create your forms, you can send them electronically as long as you get that consent. You can send them via mail, you can do W-9s and 10 matching, all that stuff is all available for you in the essential format. If you're an accountant and or a bookkeeper, you have a sole practice, you want to put all your clients into one place there, that's Tax 1099. It's going to enable that for you. It's going to start giving you that information and letting you collect that information for all of your payers and clients. So Essential has everything you need to do the filing that you want to do. eFile Plus is a subscription that we created based on how some of our users wanted to use Tax 1099, and they are people like QuickBooks Pro Advisor groups who are maybe regionally located, and they work together even though they're independent. So, you may have a bookkeeper, an accountant, it might be 20 of them in a particular area who are independent, but they wanted to pull together and use Tax 1099 and get the advantage of having lower prices by being able to do that. If you do eFile Plus, then if I created the account, I can see across everything, but each of the people that I set up can only see their own client's information in there. So they can't look at each other's information. So it's not suitable for an accounting firm that wants to work together on things, but it is suitable for a group of people who want to work independently within Tax 1099 and be able to get the pricing point a little bit better. Enterprise is for the larger staff. So those accounting firms who want to work together, who want to have one person create the form, somebody else review the form and approve the form, maybe a third person goes in and actually files the form. That's what Enterprise is for. And we have a lot of accounting firms who use that. We also have quite a few AP departments who use that, because like a gig economy company, they may have a certain group of customer support people who are working with the drivers on that gig economy platform. And their responsibility is to do a corrected form or to send a new copy out when the driver has lost their copy, things like that. So they're only granted access to particular areas of the system. That's what Enterprise is for, so you can create users who have specific rights and maybe access to specific payers within the subscription of Tax 1099. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about a couple of things that are available to our Enterprise users here only. The first one is editing approved forms. So in my description that I had just a moment ago, I talked about how you may want to set people up who are what are called data entry users. And you can think about that as a lower level, quote unquote, if you will, because that's a person who is restricted. They can only come in and create the forms. They can't file them to the IRS. Maybe it's a junior staffer, maybe it's even interns. We have a number of accounting firms who, they bring those interns in the spring from college, and they want them to help them with their 1040 filings and such, but they need to do something in January, so they bring them into Tax 1099 and have them start doing some data entry in Tax 1099. Well, that data entry user creates the form, they pass it off to a more senior staff member, somebody who is reviewing the form. That person approves the forms in Tax 1099 and then downloads them and sends them to the client. Says, hey, client, take a look at this, make sure that they look right before we send them to the IRS. The client takes a look at it and they say, oh, you know what, these are mostly right, but these three, the amounts are wrong on these three because I wrote some checks and I didn't put them in QuickBooks, I didn't put them in Xero, I didn't put them anywhere. So you don't know about those, but you need to change these amounts. So as that senior user gets that feedback from the client, it used to be that that senior user had to take their time and go in and make those modifications and changes themselves. Well, we opened this page for data entry users now, where if I'm the senior person, I can push it back down to the data entry user, and I can say, hey, you did these right, but the client failed to tell us some information. So can you go in and edit these forms? And they can go in and edit these forms now if they've been given access to this edit and review page. Another change that we made is enabling our administrative users to assign payers to their users more easily. So you can see this screen here where there's 5 users here. If I've got 5 users, if I've got a handful of clients that I'm working with in there, it's not very difficult to assign a payer to the user. I just edit the user and I say, all right, you work with client A, and you, the second person, work with client B, and so on. I can assign them however I want to. What was difficult though was if I had 350 users and I had 10,000 clients, it was really difficult to go in and make those assignments on any sort of overall basis. Really, what most of our clients were doing at that point is assigning all of the payers to all of the users, and that's not great from a security of information standpoint. So we created what are called group IDs, and that enables our clients to group their payers into certain segments. If you're, again, at an accounting firm, it could be the tax practice and the CAS practice. It could be 2 separate groups. They work on different clients, and so they need to be assigned to different payers. You can do that now pretty easily by creating a CAS group ID and a tax group ID and assigning them via import to the right users. You could also be regional. So you could have, the Northeast, you could have the Midwest, you could have the South, and you could have those 3 different groups, and you could assign each of those groups to different users inside of Tax 1099. So this process of the group IDs is just here to make it easier for those administrators to assign the right payers to the right people without having to do quite as much work. The next thing that I want to talk about here is unmasking PDFs. And when I say PDF, please insert as well USPS in there, because the PDF, while it isn't exactly what goes out in the mail, it's the basis for what goes out in the mail. The mail is slightly different because we send those to a mailing group that does those. They don't print the PDF, but they print it based on what the information that's on the PDF. Anyway, masking the PDF is the default option in Tax 1099 because that is what the IRS recommends that you do. They recommend that you not give all 9 digits of the Social Security number or EIN exposed when you send a PDF or a mailed copy to the recipient. And they do that because of data security, right? They don't want people's information to be exposed. For example, my mother-in-law lives in an apartment complex, and it's been a couple months ago now. Her mailbox was broken into, and because it was an apartment complex, it wasn't just her mailbox; it was the whole wall of mailboxes. So I just crowbarred the whole thing open, and they were going in looking for checks or credit card applications, whatever, so that they could steal information. Well, if it were in January or maybe early February when tax forms have been sent out to people, then and the tax form itself was unmasked, well, you would be able to have the name, the address, and the taxpayer identification number for that person or for that company, and then you have what you need to steal their identity. So the IRS recommends that all of the forms that go out to recipients be masked for the taxpayer identification number. That doesn't mean you have to do it that way, though. And so we've created some options where in your account, you can say, unmask everything. I want all of my PDFs to be unmasked. I want all of my mail copies to be unmasked. Just a checkbox, and it takes care of doing all of that for you. There's another option for our enterprise users where you can keep them masked, overall in your account, and you can allow individual users to go in and unmask the ones that they might need to. You may have, if you have 10,000 clients, you might have 9,995 of them that are fine with it being masked, but you got 5 clients who want to have them unmasked. So that person can go in and unmask those mailed copies or PDF copies for that individual. So just giving you some flexibility around how to do that, making it a little bit easier. There were a couple of ways to do it before, but it was kind of cumbersome to do. So this will make it easier for all of our users. And the last one in this section with relation to enterprises is for the API. And the API is just an application programming interface. That's what the three letters API stand for. And if you've ever signed up for a website using your Google ID or using your Apple ID, you've used an API. It was an authorization API where that website went over and connected to that other site and made sure you were who you said you were. You had the user ID, you had the password. If you've got two-factor authentication turned on, maybe you got a text, and they said, yep, that's who they are. It's just a way to tie information together from one place to another place. So you can think of it like a bridge of information. In Tax 1099, we have built a number of APIs that are used by different clients for different things. We have accounting firms who use the APIs to pull the PDF copies out and put them into Citrix ShareFile or Dropbox or whatever it is that they use. It requires some programming on their end, but it's easier and better than having somebody go through and actually manually pull down the PDFs for each one of the filings that they do. We also have payment platforms that use Tax 1099 as their back-end filing engine for their 1099s. We have payroll platforms who use us for their W-2s. And so they don't come into Tax 1099. They don't use the user interface. They just hook everything up through the APIs and file everything through the back door, not back door, but through the back end. And so they're using those APIs to do that. Well, you can turn on API if you have an essential account, but you can't really turn on the production API unless you have enterprise. And that's why it's in the enterprise section here. What we've done this year is we've given you the opportunity to enable it and then to disable it. Because what happens a lot of times is people want to poke around a little bit maybe, or they turn it on by mistake. They didn't know they didn't need it, and so they want to turn it off. And so we've enabled you to disable it very easily now by clicking the remove access option that you see here. All right, time for poll number 3. This one, again, an easy question, yes or no for this one. It's just, are you currently a Tax 1099 user? So take just a moment and respond to that poll question there. This is poll question 3 out of 4. So if you are kind of keeping score and you've answered all 3 of the poll questions so far, and you were looking for CPE credit, then you've done enough as far as the poll questions go. You still have 10 minutes for the 50 minutes plus, but you will have done enough for the poll questions. We will have one more poll question that comes up in the next few minutes. That would be the 4th one that you'll have an opportunity to answer. All right, I'm going to give about 5 more seconds for people to answer this yes or no question. And I'm going to end the poll. And let's share the results out there. So the majority of people are users. We've got about 18% who are not users. So again, thanks for participating in the poll there and letting us know if you are or are not a user of Tax 1099. All right, so let's get back in and talk about some features that are available for all users. Again, these are regardless of if you have modern interface or the classic user interface. So remember, the user interface changes are applicable no matter what. Let's talk about the schedule date for your IRS filings. This, again, is something that we've had available for a number of years, but probably haven't done a very good job of letting people know about it. What the schedule date does is it allows you to put a future date for the e-file to go to the IRS. It doesn't impact your electronic delivery or your mail. It only impacts the IRS filings. Well, why would I want to do that? You would want to do that because let's take an example. Let's say it's January the 15th and you're filing your 1099 NEC forms. They're due on January the 31st. It's got to go to the recipient by January the 31st. It's got to go to the IRS by January the 31st. All right, no problem. On January the 15th, you come into Tax 1099, you set up your filing, you submit your filing, and you schedule it for, let's say, January the 30th. That's 15 days later. If you have people who have used the electronic delivery option and they have opted in for receiving the electronic delivery, they're going to get that electronic copy as soon as you do the submission. So it's going to, if they've already opted in, you were proactive. You reached out to them now. Through Tax 1099, they've already opted in. It's going to go over there to the portal immediately. They'll get an email that goes over to them. They'll be able to click in the link in the email and go and download their form. If you have people who have opted out, or maybe you're not using electronic delivery because you don't have email addresses for your recipients, that happens a lot, and you want us to mail the forms for you, we'll mail the forms for you. We'll go ahead and, it takes a couple of days for them to go out, and then it takes however long for the mail to do it. But let's say that they start getting them around January the 21st. Well, that's still 9 days before the e-file is going to go on January the 30th to the IRS. And that means that if you have people who open that form, whether it's electronic or via mail, they've opened that form, they looked at it and they said, oh, you know what, this is not right. My name's spelled wrong. My amount is wrong. You paid me $10,000 and this says you paid me $20,000. Maybe somebody made a typo when creating the form. All kinds of things can happen, right? Well, because it hasn't gone to the IRS yet, all you have to do is come into Tax 1099, edit the form that's waiting to be filed to the IRS on January the 30th, and send a copy to the recipient. If it's an electronic copy, if they opted in for that electronic delivery, you don't have to do anything else. You just save the form. The copy on the portal will update. They'll have that brand new copy that they can go and download. If you mailed it to them, you can just mail them a new copy. Whether you're printing that on the PDF or you're asking us to mail it for you, you just mail out the new copy to them and they shred the old one. They've got the new one that has the right information on it. And then January the 30th comes, we're going to pick up the most recent information from Tax 1099, and that's what we're going to send over to the IRS. So any changes that you made between when you initially submitted the filing on the 15th and the 30th will be included in that process. So just be aware that that is something that's available to you. It's available when you're going through the checkout. There's a black button that says schedule all vendor e-filing. We also have this option here that you can set it up globally for your items to be scheduled on a particular date. We also created a new way to do type 1 corrections that have been submitted through Tax 1099 originally. So let me first say what a type 1 correction is. A type 1 is a easy correction, and that means that you're voiding a form or you're just changing an amount on a form. It's something where the name and TIN aren't impacted. Name and TIN changes are type 2 corrections, and they require 2 forms to be sent. With the type 1 corrections, let's say that it's a situation where you sent them a form for $20,000 and it was supposed to be $10,000 because the amount was just entered incorrectly. Well, you created that form for $20,000 in Tax 1099. You submitted it through e-file. It's past the scheduled date, with the 1099 NEC, and now it's July. They finally opened their form and they looked at it and said, hey, this is wrong. They come back and call you and say, you need to get this fixed. You go into this Manage Forms page, you find the recipient, you click on the actions, you click on File Corrected, and it's going to open the original form for you. That'll have the payer information, it'll have the recipient information, the amount that was originally filed, and up at the top, it'll already show corrected. All you have to do in that case is change the amount to $10,000, save, and you'll go through the submission process in order to make that change. You can still do corrected filings the way that we've done them in the past, which is by going and creating a new form and selecting the payer, selecting the recipient, clicking the corrected box and entering the amount. But this just gives you a shortcut if you've already done the filing through Tax 1099. You can also still do the type 2 corrections in Tax 1099, but it does take 2 forms to do that. And I'll refer you to our knowledge-based articles for how to go about doing that particular process. Because again, it's a little more cumbersome when you have to correct the TIN or the name was wrong that they gave to you on the W-9 form. All right, so opting out of emails. There are some emails we won't let you opt out of, right? Like important updates from the IRS. We want all our clients to know about those things. And so we will continue to email people about that, like when the 1099K threshold changed a few weeks ago. But we also send you lots of emails that are related to tasks that you're performing in Tax 1099. So if you do a submission, we send you an email. If you, when the IRS accepts it, we send you an email. If the IRS rejects it, which doesn't happen very often, we send you an email about that, and you can come back in, you can make the modifications that are needed, and then we'll send you another email when the IRS accepts it. Lots of emails going back and forth. We send you emails for W-9s and 10 matches and all kinds of things. You can turn those off if you want to. If you're a smaller filer, so you're just doing a couple of payers, doing 15, 10, 5, 20 forms, probably don't turn it off, because you're going to want to get those emails that come through and let you know that your forms have progressed. You filed them, the IRS accepted them, or you requested 10 matches, the 10 matches are done, you can go back and you can check on that. So you want to kind of get that notification. If you're an accounting firm, though, that is, doing thousands and thousands of clients, you might not want to get thousands and thousands of emails. And so that's the situation where you may want to opt out of those specific emails. And then this one is gathering previous receipts. This is just allowing you to pull down from Tax 1099 a receipt for a filing that you've already made. This came about, again, from feedback. This was both from feedback from customers and from our customer support team. Because what would happen previously is if you didn't get the receipt for some reason, like att.net email addresses didn't like our receipts for whatever reason. So you might not have gotten that receipt. If you deleted it by mistake, you wouldn't have it anymore. You might need it. You would have to contact our support through chat or email, and they would have to go in and dig out that email from the inbox. They'd have to forward the email back to you. So it was taking time on both sides. Now you can just run a simple report. You can say, I want them from this date to this date, and it will give you a PDF copy of the receipts that you have done during those dates inside of Tax 1099. Right, so I mentioned the knowledge base earlier for steps for doing the type 2 correction. There's knowledge base articles for doing all kinds of things. We've got hundreds of articles out there. It's just support.tax1099.com. I have a link to it in the resources slide at the back of the presentation here. And so if you haven't downloaded the slide presentation, you can certainly do that as well from the resources. It's also linked inside of Tax 1099 though, so you've got access to it. We've created a couple of new sections there. One's for the new user interface. As you can imagine, if you're using the new user interface to do things, it's going to look different than using the classic user interface. And so we had to create different step-by-step articles for doing those tasks inside of Tax 1099. There's also a section for API, and there's another section for doing other types of changes that we haven't even talked about. So there's a section for release notes where we've created everything that if we've created notes about everything that we've released throughout this year. We've covered many of the important highlights here, but there are lots of other things that are out there that are useful for you to use inside of Tax 1099. I saw a question earlier in the Q&A about Web Connector for QuickBooks Connect. We've got a step-by-step article for all the things you need to do to get Web Connector attached from QuickBooks Desktop over to Tax 1099. And so let's take just a couple of minutes and go through a real quick demonstration inside of Tax 1099. And let me log in quickly. So as you log in, you're most likely going to be in the classic view. There are like a subset of new people, new users who are going to see the modern view first, but most of you would see the classic view when you log in. This is the switch up at the top that allows me to go from the classic view to the modern view. So you can see classic view. And if I click over to modern view, it's just going to reload the page with the new user interface out there for me. And if my internet catches up to me, you'll see in a moment live demonstration. Okay, here we go. Nice. All right, so you can see in the modern view over here, the slightly skinnier menu items over here. Same menu items are here. And some of the menu items, I'll tell you, are going to point back to the classic interface. So I clicked on integrations over here. It's going to point me back to the classic version of Tax 1099. We haven't changed everything over to the modern user interface. We've just changed many things over to the modern user interface and made them available. Something else that's available up here at the top, we have a wallet link that's here. So if you are using prepaid funds, that could be because you are an accountant who's filing for a lot of clients and you just want to put $500 on the account and debit from it as you go instead of charging each individual time to your card. Well, you can see what your balance is here. And if you need to add funds, you can click on it and you can add more funds to that balance. If you want to create a form, there's a quick link over here that lets you do that. So I can go through the process here real quickly. We give you a little bit of help here if you need help finding the right form. I'm going to do the NEC form, click next. These are all my payers. So if you are a small business, you may only have one of these listed. If you are an accounting firm, yours will look like mine, and you'll have a number of different ones. So you can search for the one that you want to use here. I'm going to click next. You see the next buttons over here, okay, top and bottom. It's going to show me how I'm progressing. And there's another way to look at the progress that you're going through here at the top. So green, I've done that. I'm on the blue page now. I want to find a specific recipient. Same thing here. I can search for my specific recipients if I can type, which I cannot, and I can find the carpenter shop here. I'm going to use them as my example. This page, I don't need to do anything. This is a 1099 NEC. It's not corrected. I didn't get a 10 notice, a B notice from the IRS on this person for the second time. I don't need to check that box. We supply an account number here. You can put your own account number in there if you want to. I'm just going to leave the default there. And then because it's a 1099 NEC, there's limited box information for me here. I don't have to do a whole lot except enter box 1 in most cases for my person that I'm filing on behalf of here. So I'm going to enter $1,500 here. You can see I'm up to 75% complete now. When I click next, it's going to take me to the state page. I'm 100% here because my federal filing is all set up. I only need to do the state page if there's something I need to change. We have business logic built in, rules built into Tax 1099 that look at the recipient's address, and that person lives in North Carolina, and so we're applying the rules for the state of North Carolina. If you know, though, that they live in North Carolina now, but they lived in Pennsylvania when they did this work for you, well, you can go in and you can change that state, and you can report the information over to Pennsylvania, which has a separate filing requirement. So that state it's optional in the sense that you can go in and make the modifications to it that you might need to, but we're going to pull it up for you and give you the default of what you probably should be filing based on that recipient's address. And that's it. I'm done filling that form out. I can go add more forms. I can go check out. I can do all the things that I might need to do through the rest of Tax 1099. All right, so that's a quick demo. Let's do our last poll question for those of you who are looking for the CPE credit. This is the 4th of the 4 poll questions. So take a moment and review. This is just going through which of our features might be most helpful to you. As you do that, I'm going to look through the Q&A and see if there's any questions that haven't been answered. And some of them look like they were related to sound issues. So hopefully those were already taken care of. Let's see. And I responded about QuickBooks 3. Somebody said they had a polling error earlier, so if you had that, thanks for putting that in the Q&A. We'll try to get that updated. Hopefully you were still able to answer 3. Somebody asked if there's a recorded version of this. Yes, you'll get that via email, so that'll come out after this session is done. Question about changes with filing royalty payments this year. That's the miscellaneous form, and that is not changed. So it's still a $10 threshold for the royalty payments. There is a question about the cutoff date in January for not receiving a response regarding consent. Is there a deadline for that, basically? And the answer is yes. There's actually a couple of different ways that will work. We have an article in the knowledge base that will explain everything to you. I'm going to explain it, but in case you forget, or in case I misstate, refer to that article. There is an article about that. So the 21st is our first cutoff point. So if you're asking people for their forms to opt in now, and then you go in and you file your 1099s January the 6th, you'll have up until the 21st before those mailed copies would go out. So they'd have that much time to come back in and make that response. As you get closer to that date, though, as we get close to the end of January, we don't want to push it too far. So we're putting in a 2-day time limit. So if you file your forms on January the 20th, the people will have 48 hours to go through and make that response to accepting or consenting for that electronic delivery, and then we'll mail the forms out. So we've got kind of a rolling date there as we get closer. And then when we get to January the 29th, we won't allow any time because we need to get that mail out then. We don't want to wait any further on that particular item. Got a question about CPE. That'll come a certificate in the email, so you'll get that later. Let's see. So there's a question about the email on the consent. The form will be sent via email. Don't worry about the wording on that email. That was done in October. We've changed the email text since then, and that was from our staging environment. There's a question about 1099-K when not to issue a 1099 NEC when you pay vendors by credit card. And so the way that works, if you're paying on credit card, you don't need to send the person a 1099 NEC. The third party settlement entity, the payment settlement entity will take care of sending the 1099-K to them. Question about W-9s. You can do the W-9s in the modern user interface. So that is in both places. There's a question about payments, about pricing. So in the resources, there is a link to our pricing page that is available for anyone who wants to take a look at our pricing. There's a question, can I get a list of all recipients with email addresses? Yes, if you go to manage recipients, there's an export for all of your recipients there. You can just pull all of that information out. Somebody asked if we need their CPA license number. No, we don't. It's a CPE credit, not a CE credit, so we don't need anything for that. There is a question about how to do the electronic consent. It's in the manage recipient page. So again, we have a lot of knowledge base articles about how to use that process. So just go in and do that. Look for electronic delivery in our knowledge base, and it will give you the answers that you need. The question is this for IRS CPE or just general CPE? It's general CPE. The IRS version is a CE, so it's a continuing education as opposed to a continuing professional education. They're certified by different people. This is NASBA certified for CPE credits, so not for the IRS. All right, so I think we've got everything that was there. Let me bring up the poll question again here. And I'm going to end that poll. Thank you guys for participating. Share the results with you. And so you might need to scroll down a little bit. I have to a little bit, but the e-delivery, the scheduled date for e-filing, and let's see, corrected form. I thought I saw a different one there. Are the kind of top three that people have selected for what will be the best feature for them. All right, well, thank you everyone for attending our session today. I've enjoyed the time here together. This, I think, was our last webinar of the season, but we will have a recording posted. So if you know people who are looking to do additional webinars, please refer them out to our site. We have a training and how-tos and resources page where they'll be able to go and hopefully get a version of this where they can take a look at it. The resources page that I've mentioned a couple times is, again, linked in the PDF that's available to you there. And so this is just this is just a list of the information that's available on there. And one more time, thanks everyone for being at our webinar today. If you're looking for CPE credit, that will come to your email in the next few days. Thank you.
Hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching.